What's up, everybody? How you doing today? This is Josh here, or Carpo, if you will. And I decided I'm gonna do a video about my life story. Now, I've done like way too many videos in the last couple of years. Probably, I don't know, around 2000. I think about. I've erased a bunch of them, but I left most. And I've never really done many about myself because I try to avoid that. But I've always been really interested in the stories that I've heard from others about their lives. So this will be a random rant and really nothing that interesting. It's kind of for my own personal release to get it out, but you can follow along with me if you choose. I was born in the Portland area, and I went to many different schools, and around the time when I was 12, we had moved. We lived in Milwaukee, we moved to Beaverton, we moved to Hillsboro. I remember getting picked on by the Mexicans in the neighborhood. I remember one time they put a dirt clod on me, and but most of the time I didn't really have any huge issues with anybody. I mean, I got along with them pretty much. I was just the typical kid. Always a little bit more rebellious. I cussed a lot more than your average kid. I remember telling my mom, "fuck you," when I was like 9. And, so things like that kind of popped up. I was reading nasty joke books when I was like 11 or 12 that were way beyond my years. Didn't even understand what a dildo was, so I was trying to figure a lot of these jokes out. Around the time when I was 12, my parents got divorced. My dad moved to Oregon City, and I moved there with him. And my mom and my brother moved to Milwaukee and lived there. And so my brother and I were separated for a while. He was like 9 and I was 12. And I think the divorce kind of messed him up and probably messed me up too. But I really didn't seem to notice anything. It didn't really seem to bother me at the time anyway. So I moved to live with my dad, and we moved to Lake Oswego, which was like the kind of yuppie town. And we lived in a cheaper house in the first edition, which was downtown, and it was like $400 a month. So I had to go to school with all these rich kids through junior high, and then through my freshman and sophomore year of high school too. But during my sophomore year, it was actually like a couple days before school started, my dad died. And he had been fighting cancer. He had a tumor in his lung, and so he was at home suffering from cancer, and eventually it spread and went to his brain. And, it was a harsh time for everybody. I remember I went to school the first day, and everybody's like, "You don't have to go to school. He just died." I was like, "No, I have to do this. It's just part of life." But I know that messed me up, and I was kind of the rebellious kid. I was like the skater kid at that point, and I didn't want to face reality, so I'd go out and skate. And I had been kind of the rocker Hesher type, and the skater type, kind of on and off. But I think it went more from the Hesher to the skater phase. I had the long hair down to my butt, and eventually that went from being a mullet to being like hippie style stuff around my junior year. I went, because at that point I got kicked out of the high school. Somebody ratted me out for having a little bong I made, and they were threatening expulsion and whatnot. And then they basically wanted me gone because I was an alternative type kid. And they're like, "We'll pay for him to go to this alternative school in Northeast Portland." So Lake Oswego High School paid for me to go to this place called LEC. I went there for about a year, aced it, got like a 3.5 without even trying because there was no homework. Then the next year, since I had good grades, there was a place called MLC, Metropolitan Learning Center. It was like the alternative art kind of artsy school, and it was like kindergarten through 12. And it was hard to get in because you had to write like a paper explaining why you wanted to go there. So I gave it a shot, and they let me in. I didn't even have to get on the waiting list. It was really cool. I don't know how. A lot of it's blurry in those days, and I made it through my senior year, but didn't graduate because I was like a few credits short. Meanwhile, my brother was off roaming. He left home when he was like 14. So at this point, I was living with my mom, and eventually I left home, went to live on Hawthorne at about 18, I think, with some friends. We got a house and then ended up getting evicted like the first month. even though it was somebody's house that we, a friend of ours, we had this huge party and it just got crazy. Somebody dumped beer on my neighbor's head. I didn't invite the people. It just got out of control, and the whole neighborhood showed up on Halloween. And so I went back to live with my mom for a little while longer. And interesting times in my life. During that time, when I was in high school, actually, before that, I remember taking LSD for my first time, and that was what changed my whole rocker attitude into a tree-hugging hippie type, if you will. I loved to go out and roam in the woods on LSD, and it was plentiful. It was everywhere. I'd never really tried mushrooms, and eventually I did. Hi, kitty. And I very much enjoy them more now, but in those times there was a lot of really good acid going around, and it changed my whole perspective on the world. Some of those moments are so clear. I remember looking down at this flower when I was, I think, about 15, and I was peaking. I took three hits, which was supposed to be like 300 mics each, which I doubt they were, because that's pretty strong. Put it this way, I was really, really out there. Everything was swirling. I was out in the woods at this park. I was having a great time, and I went down, bent down to this flower, and the whole thing deconstructed in front of me. It's hard to explain, but anybody who's been in that state knows what I mean. It's not literal, it's figurative, but you understand the components. All of a sudden, the complexity of that flower came forth, and I didn't really know anything about flowers at that point, and in fact, until just this point, and this is why I'm doing this video, because I hadn't really considered it until just now that, perhaps that was one of my first experiences with the plant speaking to me. But I was just blown away with that experience, and I understood the complexity of nature all at once. And anyway, so I went through these phases where I took a lot of psychedelics, but I never abused them. It's just when I look back in retrospect, I've taken them a couple hundred times, at least, but they've been never more than, say, once a week, and as a kid that was out partying, that was pretty good. I have friends that would take acid all week long, but I tried to be responsible, tried to limit myself on how many things I took, and I've always tried to be that way with drugs, but I have an addictive personality, and I understand that, and I don't deny it. This is why I can't sit still very long. I find myself pacing back and forth. I have to find something to do. I have a lot of hobbies, a lot of things to occupy my time. So, yeah, I got out of there, and I worked some random jobs here and there, did construction and everything. And then I met my wife when I was about 23, and my whole life changed, because she had a son, and he was 3 at the time. I think he was just turned 4, and I had to make a decision in my life. Do I want to continue to go out, and do I want to travel the world, stay with my friend Tim, who wanted to travel, and I had some ideas of moving to Montana, and pretty much I was trying to escape reality through getting out to nature. And I realized that because I found someone I'd loved, and I had to make the decision, would it be selfish for me to not stick around just because I'm not ready to raise a kid? Because having a 4-year-old to a 23-year-old who's never had kids is like an experience that's just whoa. And make sure that I'm still recording. I'm not wasting time. So I decided it was worth it. I love her, and I love him, and it was a great experience. He's now 19. We've been together for like 15 years, and he graduated last year, and he's living on his own, his girlfriend right now, and she has a daughter who is the same age, about younger than he was, but it's just amazing to me, because we went camping last week, and he told me about how, he remembered me. He thought about how I'd taken on that responsibility, and he decided that he kind of wanted to man up and do it himself, and I thought that was really noble. I said, make sure you want to do it, but it shows how a parent influences a child, to make a decision. Many people will treat a stepchild like garbage just because they don't want to make an attachment to someone who's not blood. To me, that's ludicrous. I have no respect for blood relatives unless they have respect for me. It has nothing to do with who's related, and I know that some people take blood to extreme levels, and that, but to me, I would protect a friend over a cousin I didn't know, just because that's how it's not about protecting the family name, it's about protecting good people. That's how I see life. So anyway, it was worth it for me to start that relationship, and when he was like 17, 18, that's when we had our first, well, no, he was 14, maybe it must have been 15 when we had our first son. Yeah, and our first son together, and he's now almost 5, and then we have another one that's almost 2, and it's amazing. I've gone through that whole stage of raising a kid, and then I'm starting over, but I get to start from the ground up this time. I have to go through the baby phase too, and it can be rough at times. And that's another thing. Being a parent, your perspective on life is so much different than non-parents, and that's not a good or bad thing. I know I've heard a lot of parents talking about you should have kids to people who don't. No, don't have kids if you don't want to have kids. But people who don't have kids will just as often say, oh, you shouldn't have had kids, and they can't understand the bond between a parent and a child. So often we make these decisions in our life. Is it a selfish decision, or is it a personal decision? I could have chose to travel. My friend Tim, who I was going to travel the world with, I wanted to, he ended up going anyway, and he went all over the place, Bosnia and all through Europe, and ended up coming back and marrying a woman from Bosnia, I believe. I hope that's right. Anyway, they got married and moved back here, and now live in Lincoln City at the Oregon coast. And I see his situation as being like, okay, if I'd gone and done what he did, I would have eventually ended up back home. And maybe not figuratively, maybe not literally, but maybe, I should say, yes, figuratively or metaphorically in a way. Home is always back to ourselves. So all the explorations I've done in this world, inside my own mind or through reading, I haven't been able to actually get out and really see a lot of the world, so I've had to do a lot of studies. I've been to Florida and Montana and, a little bit through Utah and, but California, of course, but not much else, and it's hard if you don't understand the world to grasp what's really going on out there, unless you've traveled it, and that's why I wanted to, but I got a lot of understanding through him, at least. And I also understood what I was trying to do, which was not escape. I was trying to escape society. See, back in 98, about 96 to 98 or 99, I was kind of fanatical about the shit was going to hit the fan, and I wanted to be long gone when that happened. And this is why I was like, I didn't really want to raise a family. I used to say, who wants to raise a family in this? Look at the shit we're going to go through. We're facing all kinds of catastrophes and viruses and possible nuclear war and annihilation and everything you can imagine went through my head. And I had a fear-based lifestyle. I was never really afraid of it. I didn't get all that fanatical about it to where it got to me. But I would get really involved in it and want to get people involved and riled up. And so I understand the mindset of those people. It's you really want to express yourself, but sometimes you got to take a step back and be like, okay, dude, is this the right decision? Should I be afraid, or should I just, realize that anything could happen at any time, and mostly realize that it's all in my mind? So anyway, since then, whatever, the rest of my life is just what it is. I've had a great family, a great relationship. Moved into a house, we lived in this farmhouse first in like 99, I think, or 2000, something like that. And we had this huge farm with all this land, and it wasn't ours, we were renting it, but the guy who worked for the guy who owned it, what was his name? I can't remember it right now. Really nice guy, and he'd come by and he offered to till up all these rows for us to plant in, because there was all this unused farmland there. They were going to eventually develop it. It was right on Tualatin Sherwood Road, for anybody who knows this area, so it's right between Tualatin and Sherwood, ready for development. And so he tilled me up this land that was like 60 feet 70 feet wide by 150 feet long. I planted the whole thing, all kinds of stuff, pumpkins, corn and everything. Halfway into the summer, get kicked out of the house. They're selling the land, 30-day notice, lose everything. I end up, my wife and I and her son, we have to move into this motel for a while. It's right next to a bar my friend works at. So anyway, we lived there for like a month or two, and then we ended up living, or I think what happens is we went to live with, sometime it was either the bar or either her sister's house or whatnot. We got kicked out of her sister's, got in a big argument. Then we ended up buying a house. Then I think we moved to the motel. Then we bought a house finally. We just said, let's just do it. Took a chance, bought a house on stated income from her waitresses. She's a waitress. Bought a house for 135 grand, and didn't even have any proof. I wasn't making anything at the time, and here we are, living in East Vancouver, and ever since then, I've been happy. Just been happy to be a human. Gone through a lot of different changes in my life, and a lot of phases, and I've done a lot of thinking about life, and I really like to understand people and know where people are coming from. I just think it's way underrated, understanding folks. The more we understand how people are, the general population is, and not just the ones that we meet. See, in the old days, the internet was different. You only got certain people, internet users. Nowadays, everybody's blogging. Everybody's doing things. There's a lot of information out there. It's not just kids or not just computer geeks. Everyone. And so we get a good view of what's important to people, and it's not necessarily what a lot of people thought, and for some people it maybe is what they thought, but we're learning together, and the internet's become this organism that's brought us all closer. It's the neural pathway that connects us all. It's an amazing thing too. So that's I guess what's brought me closer to the world around me, to understanding those people that, I guess it's not that much of a surprise the way the world works. It's always interesting to see the types of people and how we behave, how we react to certain things, and learn how to better educate ourselves, how to better function in a group, and eventually, we're not going to live in a utopian society where everything's perfect, but we can do better, and at least agree to disagree on certain issues, stuff like that. So, anyway, diversion, off track. That was my life in a nutshell, so hope you're all having a good day. I'm going to get a few things done.